Welcome to Enjoy the Journey podcast, where we interview expert entrepreneurs and thought leaders to help guide you in pursuit of financial freedom. Presented to you by Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, where we help service-based business owners remove cash flow bottlenecks, maximize their profits, and turn business profits into personal wealth. G'day guys, this is Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, and we're here for another episode of the Enjoy the Journey podcast. I've got a very special guest today, Meyer from Carat Consulting. As soon as we had a conversation, we really clicked because we have very similar values, and it's amazing to see other business leaders out there really making a positive impact when it comes to helping businesses and their leaders create amazing, impactful businesses around the world. So I wanted to get Jamie on the podcast to have a conversation around her experience, how she's got to where she is, and share some of her wisdom with you. So Jamie, thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
Pleasure to be here, Jackson. I appreciate it.
That's great to hear. So whereabouts are you located at the moment, Jamie?
Right now I'm living in Mexico.
Wow, fantastic. And what brought you to Mexico?
I was every year I spend a couple of months in the States, and I was doing that. And as my time there came to an end, I was like, Australia's very, very close. And I am not very partial to being locked in a house. And I already did 14 days of quarantine earlier in the year, and I wasn't really keen on doing that a second time. So Mexico has nice weather. Their winter is beautiful. I don't speak any Spanish, so I figured it was a good opportunity to learn and not have to bring a winter wardrobe.
I love that. Fantastic. Well, I hope you're having a good time there. So Jamie, for our listeners, tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
So I am what I clarify as a business specialist. Business consultant always sounds quite, and I don't necessarily consult in the general way that people are used to consulting. My specialty literally is business. It's the framework, it's the design, the synergy, the way the business works within itself to its optimal potential. Business consultant for me doesn't really sum all of that up really nicely. And we work with a multitude of different businesses across a variety of industries. We have a certain type of client that we like to work with, but we certainly aren't fussy what they do, because design and framework and their individualism can be capitalized on with the way that we work, no matter what their specialty is.
Fantastic. Great. So what got you into the business space, Jamie? What interested you in helping design and implement these business frameworks?
Let's go back to the beginning. Okay, so when I went to school, I was quite creative. I could never decide what I wanted to do. And I actually went to school to do fashion design. So I have a certificate in fashion design and drawing. With doing that, what I decided was that if I was going to have any kind of room in the fashion space, I would go out and get myself a full-time job so that I could fund lifting off a new company. And when I started working, I just fell in love with business. I just fell in love with the way that it works, the nuances, the people involved, the structures, the way that it could shift and pivot and move. Essentially, no matter what role I had through my career, whether it was the administration or accounts, I would find ways to create more synergy just naturally. It was just what I did. And then as my career moved on, I started running companies. So I was general manager and partners of a couple of places. And the thing that I loved about that in those higher positions is I had a lot more influence on creating potential and leveraging companies and redesigning the models that they worked with. But the only problem that I had within that space was that when I would integrate those companies with other partners, I would find challenges that those other companies were struggling with and wouldn't have the capacity within that role to kind of interject myself in somebody else's business and start fixing things. So I didn't quite like those limitations and decided to start Carat Business Consulting so that I could work with a plethora of companies, address those challenges and move forward.
Fantastic. Beautiful. So let's talk about some of the challenges that you encounter, the most common challenges, because I know that most businesses have challenges, and some are easier to spot than others. Some are very surface level and easy to understand. Some are very complex and often hard to identify. So in your experience, what are the most common challenges that businesses face, particularly in our kind of post-coronavirus world?
I think the biggest thing general pre-post coronavirus really is just that they are not aware that they're even experiencing challenges. So they running into problems or running into walls or detours that they can't understand why that's the case. And more often than not, that's particularly because they have symptoms that they haven't identified before. So for example, like with a big corporation that has, like, let's say 400 stores across the nation and has, a HR department in one state, a C-suite department in another state, and the business is so disconnected from itself that the symptoms that they were experiencing pre-COVID at their bottom tier of their structure were never identified. They had good profits and they were doing well because the economy was booming and people were out and about and spending money. They didn't have to address the symptoms that they were experiencing or didn't have to be aware of them because everything was ticking along just fine. The problem is when you have something like coronavirus happen or the global recession of 2008 is that those symptoms then exacerbate because it comes down to the very small details of your business that weren't working before that now become a bigger gap for you. So predominantly most businesses, even identifying that they have challenges is probably the most common thing that I come across. Everybody thinks their business is amazing and perfect. And while it's making money, it is, but that doesn't actually mean that it's synergistic and optimal in that function. It's very easy to make money when money's printed and it's all going well, but it's a lot more difficult to do that when things are a little bit harsher in the economy.
Makes sense. So I guess whether it's a small business or whether it's a big enterprise, why do you think owners are so out of touch of their problems? Are they just burying their head in the sand or are they just not looking for problems in the first place and they're too busy focusing on the things that work? What do you think the reason is behind them not identifying those issues in the first place?
Well, I think one of the biggest problems is that we are kind of got into a business culture of just looking at reports and just looking at documents and KPIs and things that are measurable. When we do that, we start to lose touch of the essence of what a business is, which naturally involves people. I mean, you can't run a business or have a business function without people, and you can't have it be profitable unless people are buying from it. So when we are solely just focused on measurable metrics or vanity metrics, as you like to use, that it's a very easy way to disconnect from what's actually happening in your business. Because particularly when things are good, all of those reports, all of those KPIs, they look really nice because they're kind of just doing it themselves. But when things aren't great, those reports start to drop. And it's not that you have new problems, it's just that you have the same problems you had before. They're just far more obvious.
Perfect. Great. So let's talk through some of the processes that we could go through that could potentially help us identify those problems before they actually become issues. Because I'm a big believer in kind of challenging the status quo and always asking the question, what if the opposite is true? The business is great in great times, but it's always these times like this that are the undoing for many businesses. And it's the problems that you don't know that are problems are the ones that are the most dangerous. So let's talk through maybe how people can come to terms with maybe these hidden problems in their business. What are some strategies that they might be able to implement that could assist with that?
So strategy wise, like for me, I always like it, that comes down to the unique DNA of the business itself. Something that I'm a really big fan of is, so most companies have a hierarchy, like a standard traditional model has a hierarchy. There's team members, there's managers, there's C-suites, and if you start getting into corporations, you get into boards and things like that. So usually the priority for a company is that, let's say, everybody below C-suite kind of is the gears of the business, and everybody above C-suite is where they actually look at the value of their business. So they're usually looking after their shareholders or anybody that's in top tier management. For me, I think the most important thing is for us to start learning that most important part of the business is actually the gears. So if we were to flip the traditional model and have a look at it in inverted, you would see that and we put the emphasis still on the top part of that pyramid, it would then put the emphasis on the gears. So instead of worrying about what's happening and the decisions that are being made at the top end of town, we then start worrying about the decisions and the things that happen at the gear central part of the company. So we start worrying about how all the cogs are working in conjunction with each other, how well oiled they are, how healthy they are. And that is where the pyramid then becomes more balanced, because once the gears are all turning really well, the importance that the C-suite level is used to happens naturally without making disconnected decisions on behalf of the gears that aren't necessarily working at their full potential.
Yeah, this makes perfect sense to me, Jamie. I've been part of big corporates in the past, and I was always just so shocked about how tone deaf many big businesses are, where they're just making assumptions on behalf of the frontline forces, the people who are actually liaising and working with clients and customers and have real-time live feedback, and just basically ignoring them and making decisions without consulting them. And I've always tried to be very conscious about involving my team in every decision that we make, because at the end of the day, they have the best idea of our clients' problems and where our clients are seeing value and where the opportunities exist. So having a mechanism to get that feedback from your team and then being able to use that to make strategic decisions to grow is imperative. But why do you think so many businesses don't do things this way? Is it just because they've been taught the old way, that top-down leadership approach, or is it something else, Jamie, that's getting in the way?
I really think society is stuck in the Industrial Revolution. As much as we like to think that we have evolved past that and we have magnitude of different technologies and systems and softwares, our mentality is still very much stuck in the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution was necessary and served a purpose when it existed. But we are continually usually using models, not just in business, in our education system, that still work on this hierarchy structure, on this mass production, on the need to have high turnover. The problem is, in modern day society, high turnover doesn't necessarily mean profit. And high turnover doesn't necessarily mean that you have money to invest in the important parts of your business either. So, in the Industrial Revolution, bigger was always better because we needed more, we needed higher production levels. Now, bigger does not necessarily mean better, because you can have a huge annual revenue but not actually be making any money and not be able to actually invest back into your company. So I think that with our mentality and the models that we've used from the Industrial Revolution, while the paradigm and the necessity for business has changed slightly, we're still working back from what we've been taught in that era that is not actually applicable today, and doesn't actually serve as great for results as it could, as a different or an alternative business model could.
Yeah, I really get this, and I believe in the same. I think that there's definitely old age thinking, because look, I think as human beings, we often fall into the habit of what's always worked will always work. And I think that that's resulted in even some big business collapses, like, for example, Kodak. Kodak was obviously a huge business, and they invented the digital camera, and then they hid it because they're like, oh, this is technology that challenges our core business. We need to hide it as opposed to embracing it. And obviously now they're really no longer a thing. So I do feel that there is a paradigm shift with COVID, because I think it's kind of forced people to look at their business differently, and people are so disconnected because everyone's at home, even in Australia anyway, not so much in Mexico. You guys are living the dream. There is a movement of people creating more people-centric organizations. And when we spoke last time, we spoke about this triple bottom line of businesses who are looking towards creating more profit, having highly engaged people, and also benefiting the planet. So I know that this is a concept that is very close to your heart, of helping people have a three-dimensional view on business. So talk to us a little bit about your philosophy around helping, businesses be more purpose-centered.
We did have this discussion when we spoke last time, because I had actually not heard of the triple bottom line, and had created something similar in the early stages of my business that had three elements to it about the way that we structure business and the way that we invest in it. So I found that very interesting, that somehow I had a concept that already existed. But I think that the biggest thing at the moment is that people treat business as though it's an inanimate object, as like a table or a chair. It doesn't have any kind of soul. And the problem with that is when you're involving people in anything, it has to have soul. It has to have an element of understanding and clarity to it. Everybody writes a list of values and principles that they live by or that their company stands for, but they don't actually act in that manner. They don't actually have people within the company that align with those promises or values. And I think that the fact that businesses aren't clear enough on the soulful side, or just the soul, I don't like using the word soulful because it's so anti-business, it's too holistic, but there does need to be an element of influence that the company wants to have, and they actually need to act in that manner. So, we go back to the triple bottom line. There's a three-dimensional way of looking at business, and profit is one of them. Don't misunderstand me when I say that, we need to invest more in people rather than reports, because we invest in the people, the numbers and the numerical codes and all of the beautiful plus values that we see on those reports, they will come. But focusing just on the reports and taking out the health and value within the company is where those companies disconnect. Enron had the greatest list of values and principles that they stood by and didn't act in that manner. They actually acted in the complete opposite way, and that was their demise. So I think we need to start really looking at the culture that we want to create and what the company does value, and then use those things to create a synergy with the people and the systems and the customers and the clients that we have, rather than just focusing on, saying all those wonderful things and then really just worrying about the bottom line on the reports.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think, there is a lot of superficial talk around company values and mission statement, particularly at that big corporate level. I can't put my finger on it of where it goes astray, because I'm sure no business is created with malicious intent. There's so many case studies throughout history where these businesses have lost their way and they've just happened to fall into really horrible situations that have ultimately resulted in their demise. And I know for myself as a business owner, creating a culture where we live our values and that everybody who's on the ship essentially embodies those values is critically important. Once again, I guess, where do these businesses lose sight? Is it that just they get too big and they're blindly pursuing the numbers and then they bring the wrong people on board? Or do you feel that maybe everyone has the ability to be led astray, and it's just the compounding of an issue that results in these businesses like Enron failing?
It is literally a compounding of a million different things. We have a business, everybody wants growth. They all want to be bigger and better than they were yesterday. And that's fantastic. But what we don't look at is growth velocity and its stability. So we look, we want guys at the top end, they say, okay, we need 25% increase over the next quarter. Now that's a huge amount of increase. So let's go 25%, everybody go hard. We send all the sales reps out, we kill everybody to try and get to this point. And then the wheels start to fall off, because the resources to support a 25% growth in 3 months is not viable. It doesn't exist. You had a very stable limit or ceiling where you were, and everything was chugging along quite nicely, but then you are put under pressure. And so everybody's put under pressure. So then people go off and they start sort of arguing or negotiating or squabbling with suppliers to reduce costs, because they've got to make more money, because they need to fund new resources, or they need greater product turnover or production turnover. There's that side of it. And then there's the side of it where we lose sight of what we're actually creating. We lose sight of anything outside of that metrics, anything outside of the KPIs to meet that. So that we become desperate. Then we just post a ton of jobs on the internet and say, okay, we've got, 30 positions that need to be filled, and we just need anybody to fill them because we're put under pressure. The problem with that structure is, while people are fantastic, like everybody's got the capability to process data or answer phones and speak to customers, doesn't necessarily play to those people's strengths. And particularly when they're under pressure, then there's so much restriction as to what they can do, because they're more worried about how much they deal with and how well they deal with it. So those, they're just two of the factors that combine to create unhealthy ecosystem. And then the third is the fact that we're so stuck on position description. We have this role and it has to be filled, and these are the requirements that you'll meet every day in this role. Whereas I'm a bit bigger believer, while all of those things need to be done, I would prefer to remove the traditional titles of things and actually write roles to meet people's strengths. So we should hire based on our values and based on our goals, and have people come into companies that can see the value in that and align with what we're trying to achieve. And then based on their skills, find a role or position or create one that plays to the way that they can use their strengths to achieve those goals, rather than just cramming people into boxes. We're not made to fit in boxes. As people, we're all so individual and so unique, and we're not made to fit into such small parameters. So the assets that companies actually sit on within the people that they already have, rather than just mass hiring to fill under pressure resources, it's a waste. One of the reasons why I started doing what I do, because it's so prevalent through businesses, how much potential they're sitting on that they don't even recognize that they have. I just couldn't stand there anymore and watch it.
That's great advice. I think that really nails it, Jamie. I agree with this completely. And look, I know that in my own business, our business is as weak as our weakest link. And being in a people-centric organization, it is critically important that we always have the right people on the ship, and making sure that our growth is only as fast as our ability to hire the most top caliber of people, because I think you're right. There's so many businesses that get desperate, particularly in times like this when it can be really challenging to find good people, and it is the undoing of your organization. It can really put the writing on the wall if you start diluting the quality of the people that you allow into your business, because it's like a cancer and it can spread very, very quickly, and it can be very difficult to undo. So I think that's really great advice. So Jamie, let's talk about, I guess, some actionable takeaways for people. We've spoken about some big concepts, and we've spoken about some big business ideas, but I think that they can definitely be chunked down and implemented into small businesses. So we're talking about 6 and 7 figure businesses. So if you had to summarize really the top 3 action items or considerations that small business owners need to take away from this podcast and really ponder when it comes to implementing into their own business, what would be your top 3 tips?
Focus on unmeasurable metrics would be my number one tip. Focus on the things that you don't have measurable KPIs for, and that includes people. Focus on the people that you have within your business. That would be tip 1. Tip 2 would be determine the value that you want to have and that you want to give. The value that you're going to hold, the measurement of value that you're going to hold yourself to, your teams to, and the measurement of value you're going to hold the company to in relation to your customer base. Tip 3 would be get bold and creative. It would be to step out of the traditional model that you believe business has to fit into and start thinking about what makes you unique, what capacity you have to be an individual, a trailblazer, a disruptor, whatever word you want to use. There is something about everybody's business that makes it stand out from the crowd. I don't think that we focus enough on that magical formula that we could utilize to reach our optimal potential.
Beautiful. I think that's great advice. So Jamie, what does the future look like for you? Where do you see the biggest opportunities for you and 9 Carat over the next 12 months?
I mean, 9 Carat, the business plan for 9 Carat, there's 4 walls in the room I'm sitting in, and I probably don't think that all the ideas that I have could fit on them. So the next 12 months, I would like to have greater opportunity to change the world of business. That's the number one priority. That's what I do every day, all day. It's what I love. It's what I'm passionate about. And that is my way of changing the world and making it a better place. So growing that platform, having clients that can embody and learn how to flip their businesses to make them more successful than they already are, that can recognize their full potential on a grander scale. I would like to branch out into a more revolutionary platform with conversations like this, opening this up to a wider market of people so that they can, and not just for business owners, for people that work within businesses, that realize that there are businesses out there that they can add value to, and that they can, advance themselves, their careers, and the companies that they work for at the same time. So I would like to use that platform to educate people that there are different business models, there are different options, and that box that we think that is there doesn't exist. And I think hand in hand with that is teaching people that the only limitations that we incur are the ones that we put on ourselves. So from a human-centric point of view, I would definitely like to continue to use my business and my platform to help alleviate some of those limitations that we have adopted for ourselves, and that really stand in the way of us achieving whatever it is that we set our minds to.
No, that's great. I think you embody everything you talk about, Jamie, which is great. And I wish there was more business advisors and consultants out there that practice what they preach. I think that's critically important. So, Jamie, if somebody's listened to this podcast and they'd like to get in touch with you to have a chat about how you might be able to help them in their business, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Direct phone, but website is probably the best. So that's www.9carat, carat.net, or phone or cell 0447 392 189. Both of those avenues will get you directly in contact with me.
Beautiful. We'll include all of that in the show notes. Jamie, it's been an absolute pleasure, and we've gone deep on a few subjects I think is really important. And hopefully it's going to help our listeners to look at their business in a different light and make sure that they run a purpose-driven organisation that allows everyone to achieve their goal. So I really appreciate you making the time, and looking forward to chatting again soon.
I really appreciate you having me, Jackson. As always, our conversations are very interesting and can take on a mind of their own. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
It's always a pleasure.